Alistair.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can well understand the need to update the Crown Estate Act, particularly in regard to the financial reach of the Crown Estate and the assistance that it may require in that regard. Though it is perfectly clear, even listening to this debate, that members have rightly discerned that the real driving force behind this legislation is in fact to twin with Great British Energy the promotion of offshore wind energy. And that seems to be the primary motivation which lies behind much of this bill. And when you create circumstances where the Crown Estate is required and facilitated to increase its own financial success, and then you twin it with the promotion of GB Energy, you inevitably incentivise the development of offshore wind, which in its own circumstances has its part to play, but is not, I believe, the answer to all our needs. I've already in Northern Ireland seen examples of proposals for offshore energy, particularly in the South Down area, which provoked great and rightful opposition from the fishing industry, leading to substantial difficulties on that front. And yet it's quite clear from this bill that when it talks about sustainable development, it's not talking about sustainable development go into the future in respect of the historic use of our seas as fishing grounds. It's talking about sustainable development for our seas as sites for offshore wind energy. And as an honourable member raised, there is a tension between offshore wind developments and wind farms and fishing. But it seems to me that this bill has made up its mind as to which is the priority. And we've heard in this debate that the definition that's going to come of sustainable development specific to this Act is one which is very much orientated on the climate change theology, and therefore is going to be that which places the focus for the need for wind farms above the needs of the fishing industry. And that, I think, is not well serving some of the interests of our coastal communities. And I think there is a need to reinstate some balance into this in that regard. When I look at Clause 3 and see this focus on sustainable development, which has the obvious meaning that I've referenced, and then look at Clause 5. Now, I know the government has said they will be removing Clause 5, but in Clause 5 there's an interesting contrast. In Clause 5, when it comes to salmon farming, one of the matters to be looked at is environmental impact. But when it comes to wind farms, no such requirement to look at environmental impact, only to look at sustainable development, which is couched in the terms that are to favour offshore wind development. I think of my own constituency of North Antrim, and there are already proposals that not far offshore, just beyond the territory that contains the wonderful Giant's Causeway, Rathlin Island, that there could be, cheek by jowl, coastwise, with areas of outstanding natural beauty, huge offshore wind farms. I don't think that's enhancing the coastline or the waters in and about North Antrim. There have been similar proposals off Port Stewart in County Londonderry. But when I read this bill, it seems to me that the primacy is being given, the nudge, in fact it's much more than a nudge, the incentivising that has been given is towards pushing along offshore wind farms with little regard, and certainly no corresponding regard, to the environmental impacts that that could have on whole communities. So, certainly.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way. I'm just struck by the fact that I know that so many of the people that live in his constituency will be dealing with extremely high energy bills in poorly insulated houses, and desperate indeed to be able to see those energy bills go down, see decent jobs come back to Northern Ireland, and for them and their communities to thrive. I also recognise the value and importance of heritage sites, for example in my constituency in Thanet, surrounded on 3 sides by sea, with enormous amounts of opportunity for offshore wind, as well as wanting to retain the value and beauty of our surrounding environment. Can he not see that these things are reconcilable, and that this is not a theology, it is a science and an economic requirement of this country in order to be able to serve his residents and constituencies as well as mine?
The point I'm making, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the tension between the environmental impacts and the sustainable development, which is the code word for offshore wind. The tension between those in this bill is out of kilter, because it is very much weighted in favour of the offshore wind with little or no regard, it would seem, to the environmental impacts. And I'm simply saying to this House, we need to have regard to both. And I don't think we serve future generations well if we surrender the beauty and the serenity of our coastline that we enjoy to that which will be blotted for years to come with huge offshore wind farms. Yes, they have their place, but not in every place. That, I think, is the key component. You know, take the Giant's Causeway, UNESCO site, and are we to say that shortly beyond it there should be giant wind farms? What does that do for the UNESCO setting of the Giant's Causeway or other sites around the United Kingdom? So I'm advocating caution. I'm advocating that we remember it's not just about offshore wind farms, it's also about preserving, protecting and getting it right in respect of our environment. And I'm not sure that the balance in this bill does that.